Animal Well is a very special game made by a single developer, Billy Basso. It was released on the 9th of May 2024 and has an incredibly high review score on Steam. That is an amazing achievement for pretty much any game. But after my first playthrough, which took about 4 hours, I just didn't like it. Why? To give you some context, I'll tell you a brief story. When I was around 12 years old, I remember going through the electronics store with my dad, and he pointed to a Nintendo DS game that catched his attention. It was Castlevania: Dawn of Sorrow. At this age, I didn't know English or what castle even meant, but seeing my dad's reaction, I decided to buy the game. Not with my money, of course. You know, I had none. I was 12. After playing it over the next few days, it felt similar to a game I played before, Metroid Fusion. I noticed that Castlevania: Dawn of Sorrow and Metroid Fusion are similar, but also very different. I learned that genres exist, specifically the Metroidvania genre. As I got older, into my late teens and early 20s, I played a variety of games. I had my fair share of first-person shooters with Black Ops 2, experienced open-world games with Assassin's Creed, and got griefed way too many times in Minecraft multiplayer.
This feels good.
But in between those games, I always came back to Metroidvanias. It had this beautiful balance of exploration, puzzles, and combat that always drew me back in. Going back to Metroid Fusion for a second, I love how incredibly overpowered you get over the course of the game. I love games that make you incredibly powerful over a longer period of time if you decide to seek out that power. It's that typical power fantasy in many games and shonen anime. Maybe I prefer my games this way because I grew up with Naruto, One Piece, and funny enough, Dragon Ball GT for the 3 people that still remember that. In addition to all that power fantasy, I enjoy my Metroidvania abilities like double jump, dash, and similar abilities to be passive and not active. If I can instantly use those abilities without having to equip an item first or meet a condition, then I prefer that a lot more. And from a character point of view, I prefer the ability to also be part of my character, not an item. But that is less important. So in short, becoming very powerful over the course of the game and having passive abilities are the 2 major things in a Metroidvania that I'm looking for when buying a game with a Metroidvania tag on Steam. I told you all of this so you know more about me and now understand from which point of view I look at Animal Well. I also hope you don't rip me apart in the comments, because I'm going to mention things in the game that you probably enjoyed, but I didn't. Before we jump into the game, and don't worry, there's no ad about the VPN, I just wanted to mention that I'm not a story kind of a guy in most games, so my focus will be on gameplay and how the world feels and looks, instead of going deep into the lore and story. In addition, as the intro said, massive spoiler warning. I highly recommend playing Animal Well and actually all Metroidvanias completely blind first. I didn't even look at the trailer before buying the game. With this out of the way, we are entering the spoiler zone now. Time to put on your safety goggles and let's jump in. To start off, let's talk about what is right in front of us. A screen. Sorry, I mean the visuals. Animal Well is absolutely gorgeous. The game has rich, deep colors, various simulations like water and smoke, and most importantly, lighting. Many indie games don't do lighting, and it can make them look flat and boring. But Animal Well has a lighting system that is reacting to the environment and your items. If I use the flute, which I received later in my playthrough, the character and the notes floating away from it emit light. Absolutely phenomenal, and lighting like this should be the norm in any game nowadays. A lot of gameplay that you see of this game is with scanlines, but you are seeing it without, because I'm not a fan of it. Scanlines are a neat addition, but just like motion blur, I turn them off right away. The reason why I turn off scanlines is because I have a lazy eye and it's sometimes difficult to focus. Scanlines can also obscure locations, secrets, and paths, so it makes gameplay kind of worse for me. It just makes it unnecessarily more difficult. I don't need some black bars at 30% opacity to block my view. I think we can be very happy that Billy took years to make Animal Well look this good. I seriously cannot point to any other game in the genre that has this visual style, a proper lighting system, and also simulations on top of it. It's incredibly unique. The world. Earth. Wait. The world of Animal Well is just great, because it's incredibly dense and having lots of interconnected rooms, which reminded me of Environmental Station Alpha. Not only is it great how it's pieced together, having seamless transitions between biomes, but the areas also make sense in the game. To compare this to Lone Fungus, another Metroidvania, that game had a robot dungeon early in the game. That felt really out of place coming from some underground cave system. It literally blindsided me when I saw it. Now, one thing that Billy mentioned during a podcast was that he wanted to have landmarks across the game so you can orient yourself.
Were landmarks for navigation something that you intentionally sort of made, or was it something that came about out of playtesting, or again, something entirely organic that the community have just started trying to use?
Yeah, that was definitely intentional. I think early on, I was like telling myself, I'm like, when this game's done, I want there to be like a unique sort of identifiable object in every single screen of the game. And I don't know if I really achieved that, or at least they're all unique.
Those landmarks he mentioned, they didn't work for me. Maybe I wasn't in the right headspace when playing the game, but either way, I did get lost a few times, but thankfully never for more than a few minutes. Getting a bit lost in a new world is kind of common in the Metroidvania genre. Something that is more gameplay related, but I'll just throw it in here, is movement. Moving the character through the world in Animal Well feels very responsive. I'm so happy it feels good to move the character around. I play many games from AAA to indie games to demos on itch.io, and so many games still screw up that feeling of controlling your character. It matters so much, especially when you want me to move all the time and explore the world. I played After Image for way too many hours because I hoped it becomes better. Spoiler, it didn't. And my god, something is just not right when moving the character. I can accept it, but that doesn't mean I enjoy it. In addition to that, which is also gameplay related, are the whales. They are whales, right? Wait, hold up. The IGN article calls them fish heads? They definitely reminded me of whales, specifically that Pokemon. Anyhow, there are many fish heads across the world and are a secondary fast travel system that usually connects 2 different rooms. To activate them, you need to use the bubble wand item near them and they will steal your bubble. Quite rude. You can then jump into the bubble where the fish swallows you whole, transporting you through the pipes before you are pooped out the other end. You can't jump back into the pipe because this fast travel system is a one-way lane. To have this entire pipe system across the entire world is such a cool and unique idea that I haven't seen in any Metroidvania. It's also somewhat hidden in the background, and it's actually neat to see your character physically go through it. You can even hear the different sounds in the background as you travel from room to room. Sometimes you hear sounds that are familiar and you realize, oh, did I just go past this room? I love that feeling in Animal Well, and it pops up so many times. The only downside of this is that you do not know where you come out. I never felt like I'm risking something, like I would die if I go into the fish head, but it does slightly annoy me when I have to then repeat the previous puzzle to get back to where I was. I guess it becomes less of an issue when you learn the world, which I never did and couldn't in only 4 hours. Those are minor issues and not that big of a deal. What I can't look past is the item system for me. So let's get into the meat of the video. No, it has not been 2 weeks since the last recording. Why did you ask? Right away, let me rip that band-aid off. I don't like the implementation of abilities or items in Animal Well. To a degree. You probably saw that coming during my intro when I mentioned I enjoy my Metroidvania abilities like double jump, dash, and similar abilities to be passive and not active. For example, one of the first items you may find is the bubble wand, which I showed earlier when it comes to the whales. I mean, fish heads. It allows you to create a bubble that slowly floats upwards that you can then jump on and jump off of. It is an indirect double jump. This implementation allows for the developer to create very interesting puzzles. Like when you create a bubble, then jump on it, let it slowly float downwards, and while you stand there, you can use other items in the meantime. Nice idea, but also not something I want as the main part in my Metroidvanias, because there are 2 issues. The first issue is that the playstyle of Animal Well is quite slow and passive. It is objectively slower compared to other Metroidvanias like Ori. Most abilities in Ori are triggered quickly so you can move on and don't have to stare at the game while you wait. Best example in Animal Well are situations in which you have to stand on your bubble and wait until it slowly floats down so you can progress that bubble. I would say that if I didn't do a second playthrough and noticed you can press and hold down to force the bubble to move faster. Still, the game is quite slow and passive, especially when platforming, because there is no direct double jump, wall jump, slide, or even the possibility to run. Actually, I'm not even sure if those little feet can run. This relates to something I like to call player power. As mentioned in my intro, I love games that make you incredibly powerful over a longer period of time if you decide to seek out that power. In short, I want to feel powerful as a player as I progress through the main game. This is easily solved with some interesting movement abilities that make me travel through the world faster compared to at the start. But Animal Well, with its objectively slower playstyle, never made me feel powerful in a big way. I'm not saying games like this should never be made or are objectively bad, which they aren't, but this type of playstyle isn't really for me. The second issue is having to switch between items. During my playthrough, when I wanted to explore this gorgeous and strange world, I got annoyed having to switch to the bubble wand over and over. I never remembered the position of my items, and thus I swapped to a different item, fumbled around with the shoulder buttons, and messed up the puzzle. Later on, when you have more items and you have to rotate between all of them, especially in a stressful situation, it's even worse. Now, I would say that if I didn't do a second playthrough and noticed the game pauses when you press the Y button or menu button to open up a small UI in which you can choose your items. Billy probably knew this is important for the average player, allowing them to take their time while choosing an item. It's a great decision that I didn't take advantage of because I wanted to be faster and thus fumbled around with the shoulder buttons. This definitely caused some negative moments that I partially did to myself. This whole thing may seem petty, which I totally understand. After my second playthrough of Animal Well and reading my opinions and thoughts in this script, I realized that I enjoy the game more now than before. This still doesn't fix the core issues I mentioned until now, but I definitely appreciate the game more. What also isn't fixed are the issues with my hands. Specifically, they strain fairly quickly nowadays. Yes, I'm doing jazz hands. The straining of my hands could be easily solved by just taking a break. Yes, you're very correct if you thought that. I just like to play a game for multiple hours to be able to sink into that world and fully experience it. I don't want to drag myself out of it every 30 minutes. It's like having to watch a movie in 3 parts. In addition, I also can't really use the keyboard to play 2D games. It doesn't work mentally. Instead of the shoulder buttons, I could have probably changed them to other buttons, but I'm someone who reviews games, sometimes, so I wanted to see the developer's decision in its original form without changing too much. Well, I did remove the scan lines though. This whole hands situation all comes down to Billy's decision to have the item system be this way. You have to swap to specific items over and over if you want to do certain actions. That is just a technical decision by Billy, and that's fine if he enjoys it. I just dislike it a lot, and it actually hinders me to enjoy the game more. Again, all I want to do is a basic ability in a Metroidvania, like an additional jump in the air or throwing an item. But the game says no. I know that the item system in Animal Well allows for crazy stuff like this, where you just jump infinitely. Seriously, I don't know what speedrunners of Animal Well are taking, but I want some of that. Speedruns are amazing to look at, but this is not the normal way to play the game, nor would I want to play the game like this. It's awesome that it's possible overall, but my playthrough isn't improved by being able to break the game or making crazy combos with items. As the basic player, I still have to swap to that item, probably miss it, fumble around a bit more, then use it to then jump on the bubble, miss the bubble, try again, and then finally get on that platform. Of course, this is highly exaggerated, and you do get better at platforming and do less mistakes as you play more. But I also just want to do a double jump. I seriously don't think adding multiple steps or conditions to basic Metroidvania abilities is the right way to go. It's not complicated, but adding a bunch more button inputs and removing accessibility is questionable, especially when the playthrough is this short. Jump cut. Another ability that you may have noticed from the previous clip that I want to jump on, yes, pun intended, is the disc. Throughout the playthrough, you will find a disc that can be thrown horizontally, which has multiple use cases that the game does not tell you directly. The disc can hit levers, bounce off of walls, and come back to you. It can also bounce back and forth between two levers. This could activate platforms that you can stand on and thus progress the game. Overall, very cool item, and also gives the whole world this physical feeling, which I love. The disc can also break ice in certain parts of the game, which I found out during the last third of the game. This also works with stone, which I didn't figure out, but I saw it in the speedrun afterward. Most importantly, you can jump on the disc and ride it. I was happily surprised when I naturally stumbled upon it. Sadly, I didn't find out before going past all the doggies. Multiple times. Now, the larger issue with the disc is it would be an amazing way to increase horizontal speed of the character, making traveling through this world faster, which I want in my Metroidvanias. But first, you have to throw it, it has to bounce off of an object to return to you, so you can then jump on it. So there is a massive asterisk added to that item, instead of just making it easy and fun to use for faster movement. A great example on how to give the player better and faster movement in a Metroidvania is how Unsighted does it. You get an item that is very similar to the spinner from The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. That's why I put Twilight Princess in the spoiler section at the start of the video. You know, some people haven't played the game and I didn't want to spoil it. Getting back to the spinner in Unsighted, you can jump on it and move quickly through the world. But you do bounce off of enemies and environment, so there is some skill involved to maneuver it smoothly. How do you activate it? If you press the jump button in the air again, you quickly get on it. This makes an item for the average player easy to use, improves movement through the world, and technically could also be used as a weapon. You can actually increase the damage of your spinner in Unsighted. Kind of neat. Another example is Metroid Dread with the speed booster. If you have the space to run for a bit and activate your speed booster in time, you gain incredible speed, and in addition, you can use other abilities like sliding and wall jumping. This makes movement through the world way faster, both horizontally and vertically. Of course, you kind of need to know the world to know what comes up in the next room. Otherwise, you bonk against the wall. There is also quite some skill involved to time things correctly. Still, it's quite simple to activate and very effective if done right. Getting back to Animal Well, I just want to have an ability or item in it that lets me travel faster later on compared to at the start of my playthrough. This would give me this feeling of player power that I want in my games, as mentioned earlier. But it's important to have it be effortless, or mostly effortless, as long as it doesn't break my hands doing a bunch of button inputs or staring at the screen, waiting for a thing to return. I understand both Unsighted and Metroid Dread give you, the player, a lot of player power compared to Animal Well. And that is what I love and prefer in my Metroidvanias. Animal Well just keeps the player power very, very low. Too low for my taste. Now let's talk about the eggs in the room. Holy heck. In my first blind playthrough, I grabbed a bunch of eggs that are scattered throughout the world before I even knew what they were for. The eggs in Animal Well usually come from hidden areas or doing puzzles that aren't the main path. I did lots of these side quests or side puzzles expecting it to be main content. Right away, it thankfully isn't a collectathon because I I hate those. What I hoped is an NPC that takes my eggs and I can get more health, upgrade an item, or he sells me a new item that lets me move through this world faster. Anything, please. After finding that bird in that room, I realized I needed a certain amount of eggs to go through the doors to the left. Why aren't the egg symbols lighting up and communicating to the players how many they are missing? I know I can count and can look up how many eggs I have, but still, why? Moving on. Seeing those doors, I wasn't feeling it, because I do not see the reward, nor do I enjoy moving through the world with the items I have to gather the eggs. But I had high hopes for a game with such a high review score. I thought that this will be the big moment I have been waiting for. Something that will really reward me for the many puzzles I did. An item that gives me this feeling of power in this world in which I'm just a little blob trying to survive. Wait, what is my character again?
You hatch from this flower in the beginning and you find yourself playing as this like kind of indescript circle character. Maybe a blob, maybe a balloon, maybe a a lot people call it all different things.
I love it. What's the weirdest one you've heard? Is it mine? Is it blob or
No, blob I would say is the most common.
yeah? Okay.
What did someone just said like sentient orb? That's what it's called.
Alright, I will keep calling him Blob. To get past the first door, I continued playing, gathered more eggs, and found out that behind the first door is the fast travel item. The flute. Really neat idea, and I love the lighting when you use it. But then I found out that the fast travel system sucks. For the average player. While writing this script, I just googled something because I was curious. There is a song that you can play with your flute that lets you fast travel instantly to the fast travel hub area. Well, this isn't explained in the game in plain text. I did notice the goddamn fish at the bottom, but the problem is, it doesn't activate if you wait at the top. You have to go a step lower. Why? Just repeat his movement over and over if you're in the room. This made my first playthrough so much worse. But my second playthrough after I googled the solution, it was really cool to quickly move from my current location back to the fast travel hub area. This relates to secrets and the issues I have with it, but I'll talk about that in the next section. So keep in mind, I didn't know the flute song for the entire first playthrough because the game didn't tell me, and moving through this world was already quite tedious to me. So how does fast travel work? After receiving your flute, you can find a room right next to it with a flute statue and an animal head. Playing a single note opens the mouth of the animal, which you can jump into. This lets you travel to the fast travel hub area. Here you can find another statue, can play another note to open the mouths of all the other animal heads. If you have touched the flute statue near those animal heads before. Those other animal heads are scattered throughout the world. So if you're like me and didn't notice the animal heads in some rooms, or even the flute statues in the world, you didn't have access to that fast travel spot. At that point in my first playthrough, I explored a lot of the map already, and now I had to go through the world again, look into every corner in this pretty dark game, hopefully don't miss anything on the way, to finally be able to use the fast travel system for that spot. I was a bit pissed at that point, because keep in mind, I did many puzzles to get the eggs to unlock this item, which didn't even make me feel powerful. From an objective point of view, very neat idea to have a physical place that connects the fast travel spots. Fast traveling also has no loading time, which is awesome. But subjectively, I kind of enjoy it. after my second playthrough. I think you're starting to see a pattern here. Adjacent to a fast travel system in games is the map. It's the way you orient yourself in most games. In Animal Well, the map shows a variety of things and the 4 main flames that have to be found, which is the main quest. I think that's the first time I mentioned what you're even doing in the game. Actually, never mind. I said you shouldn't watch this video if you haven't played the game. So everyone who still watches should know what you're doing in the game. And if you're still watching without having played the game, you're welcome for that jump scare. Where the heck was I? Oh, right, the map. The fast travel spots on the map aren't indicated automatically, is what I would say if the Game Rant article that told me about the flute song earlier also didn't tell me about the tiny white pixel that indicates the fast travel spot. I think we can all agree this is objectively garbage. I didn't see those in my first or second playthrough, and it was really tedious and just unnecessary to use the stamps to mark stuff on the map. If you are the developer and you know where stuff is in your game, like, just mark it, bro. Just mark it automatically when I go past the thing, or if the thing is in my view. Okay, let's step away from the map, fast traveling and the flute, and go back to the eggs. I have to mention what's behind the second door, which was also the last door I opened, for reasons that will be crystal clear in a bit. To open the second door, I needed 16 eggs, which I gathered after having played a bit over 2 hours. With the last few eggs gathered, I went back to the egg room and saw the door open. Keep in mind, I did lots of side puzzles, checked many hidden spots, experimented with items to find secrets to hopefully find some sort of power. I didn't. I found eggs instead. So, with the hope that the game rewards me with player power that isn't a flute, I went through the second door, opened the chest, and got a pencil. It lets me draw on the map. I was very close pressing Alt F4 when I got the pencil. I sadly played over 2 hours by now, or else I would have refunded the game. That's not even a joke. I'm being dead serious here. I would have refunded that game at that point if I didn't already play more than 2 hours. So believe me, I was very disappointed getting the pencil, and I was so mad writing this part of the script. This whole situation around these protein orbs taught me one thing as a player for the rest of my playthrough. I learned that doing side content, finding secrets, and gathering eggs is not worth my time because it doesn't give me more player power that can be easily used and isn't hidden or obscured like the instant fast travel song. Doing side content and gathering eggs is technically a waste of time because, in my opinion, being able to mark the map in any way should be the norm. That shouldn't be hidden behind 16 puzzles or something in the game. This meant even if I saw a secret path or a chest at the edge of the screen that I could potentially get, I didn't even try to get it anymore. Because if the reward would be an egg, I would blow my brain out. In Minecraft. If you love Animal Well and you're still watching, bless your heart. I hope you understand why I do like and don't like this game for very specific reasons. Still, I'm very happy this game exists and that it gets so much support. I hope for other players that more games like this come out in the future, just not myself. I would be an awful person saying I don't want any more horror games to exist in the world because I don't like horror games. No, it's great that this genre is quite popular and more people can enjoy it. I personally won't play horror games because they aren't for me. yes, I'm a pussy. Same with Animal Well, which is a very puzzle-heavy Metroidvania, and if people enjoy that, they should definitely get more of that in the future. But, as said in my intro, I want a balance between exploration, puzzles, and combat. This whole thing leads to something I didn't know before jumping into Animal Well. As mentioned, I highly recommend going into any Metroidvanias completely blind. I did so with Animal Well, but this was maybe a mistake? If I would have read the negative reviews on Steam, which usually point out a very specific issue, I would have noticed that this game is a puzzler. It kind of doesn't have combat. Yes, you can hit the enemies with an item, but they won't die, and this is not real combat. I think we can agree on that. I do not like Metroidvanias with a very heavy focus on puzzles. Still, puzzles are something I do enjoy in my Metroidvanias, and you always need puzzles in them, or else there is no difficulty in exploring the world. But I also want combat. It doesn't need an RPG element like the Castlevania games with a bunch of numbers and weapons, but at least something. We have talked a lot. Actually, I talked a lot. I'm the one yapping over here. But there is still one major thing I want to mention. Secrets. Animal Well has a lot of secrets, like the flute song I googled earlier. Technically, I use DuckDuckGo, but anyhow. This might be a hot take, but when I buy a game, I want the core game to be the majority of the game. I do not want a game that has more secrets than the actual core game I paid for. This is very specific to Animal Well and another game I mention in a bit. Most games nowadays have systems to keep the player engaged, like with quest markers. Billy Basso mentioned during a podcast that he doesn't like that system.
In a lot of like RPGs or open world games, like when I see a character with like a exclamation point above their head, like they're about to give you a side quest, like that instills like no joy inside me. It almost feels like someone's like, hey, I have a favor to ask. And it's like, if they were to do that in real life, you wouldn't be like, oh yeah, let's see what you got for me. It's like someone's like soliciting you on the street or something.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, I don't have time for you.
I think a better game doesn't have quest markers either, but lots of developers that make Metroidvanias realized over the past years that just hiding stuff and having to bomb every block is also not a good system. If you played old Metroid games, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So you need a thing in your game, like an item, an NPC, anything really, that gives the player some sort of tool that gives them a clue. The clue doesn't even have to be specific. It can also just be a simple indicator like a question mark. Good job to Lone Fungus for understanding that. Of course, is it actually hidden and a secret at that point? Yes and no. The question mark doesn't tell me what I have to do here or even which ability or item is necessary. It just indicates to the player that something could be done near this spot. It could be a health upgrade, a new weapon, maybe an egg. Please don't be an egg. You could even say this only works with an active item that shows secrets or at least lets you know something is different here. More and more games have a similar system to Hollow Knight and its charms. Usually one of those charms, or whatever is appropriate for other games, have the ability to show secrets or let the player know something is different here. So if your game has that tool for the player, it's still fairly hidden. Unless the tool literally makes breakable walls glow in bright green. That would be a bit too obvious. To get back to secrets and a game I recently played live on stream in one sitting, Tunic has many secrets hidden in plain sight. I love that there are shortcuts that you aren't even aware of until later. In addition, the core game and the main playthrough gave me quite a lot of player power compared to at the start. Some issues arose later when it came to the more obscure secrets. There are clues in the game that hint at more endgame content that you can find. I just never understood them, so I had to Google it. That's probably my skill issue showing, but also, can we maybe stop or change the whole press button combinations randomly in the world and hope something happens? I know it's a little nod to the Konami code from way back when, but you need to at least indicate to the player that they messed up. If you want me to precisely press many buttons in a row and then don't even tell me that I did mess up, you do know as a game developer what this teaches the player, right? The player will think this is the wrong button combination, or even worse, the wrong place. Even though it is the right button combination and the right place they have in mind, which is the secret they have solved, but you as the game developer didn't indicate to the player they are correct in their assumption. Communicate to the player, please. Getting back to Animal Well, which goes even further beyond and has so many secrets and so much stuff hidden, I start to wonder what the core game actually is and what I paid for. I don't want to make a big deal out of it, but it does matter to me because of how I grew up. I was unemployed for many years because I was a dumb, young 20-year-old and didn't work. Thus, I barely had enough money to buy games during a big sale. In that time, I learned that some games gave a lot more playtime for each dollar spent. Just look at Hollow Knight for $15 and Terraria at around $10 on Steam. As mentioned in my intro, it took me around 4 hours before seeing the credits. Animal Well is $20. I usually want an hour of playtime per dollar paid. This is highly unlikely with most games nowadays, and I am starting to warm up to get fewer and better hours for a higher price tag. Billy took 6 years to make the game, and bless his heart for making the game he really wanted to make. But this is a commercial product that he sells and I paid for. Fun is very subjective, but how do you think I feel when I hear through the internet tubes that I played the long tutorial when I see the credits? Apparently, after you defeat the final boss, there is still a lot more game to play and many secrets to figure out. I'm fine with some content in the game being hidden or some true ending related stuff having somewhat obscure secrets, but I still want to have played a large portion of the game when I see the credits. This might sound absolutely stupid to some because it's a puzzler, so just figure the secrets out, bro. Of course, but I'm not a puzzle enjoyer in Metroidvanias, nor does the game give me any tool to figure out said secrets. And then there is still that whole player power feeling that I mentioned many times by now. The base game itself needs to be great first to then entice me to play it even more and figure out those secrets. The way to do that is making exploring and traveling through the world quickly, smoothly, and add a tool for the player that lets them know where secrets might be hidden. Metroid Dread has an incredibly overpowered ability that highlights secrets very obviously. This might be a bit too much, but I'm sure a lot more people liked that game because of it. I mean, the movement in that game is also buttery smooth, but I think you get what I'm trying to say. Animal Well doesn't need an item that creates a massive glowing orb that flies towards the secret, but anything is always better than nothing at all. Billy is clearly not that type of person though, as seen in this clip.
One of the people working there, his name was like Mr. Tuman, and he was also working in like the game design lab. And I think I made it so if you like tapped a certain thing like 20 times or something, like it just showed a full screen picture of like Mr. Tuman's face. Like it just like covered it up, and it was kind of like an unflattering photo where it was like camera flash like like in his eyes, and his like cheeks looked like really rosy. And
the clips that I have shown until now are from a 3.5-hour podcast with Billy. I wouldn't have watched it if I didn't care about Animal Well. So I want to make sure that you know that Animal Well is an amazing game. It just sadly wasn't for me for very specific reasons that I have been yapping about until now. I don't hate the game or dislike it in a major way. There are just many decisions by Billy that I'm not a fan of, which is fine. Simple things could be added or improved to make the average playthrough for someone like me a lot better, but Billy said he doesn't want to make DLCs or make major updates, which I respect. Also, I'm not worth his time to make these changes either, but maybe there are modders out there that will create an easy baby mode for people like me. That would be great. After my 4-hour playthrough, I closed the game and uninstalled it. I briefly talked about the game on my stream, and I actually wanted to talk about many other Metroidvanias in this video, but I really wanted to talk about Animal Well and put my 2 cents out there. Maybe I'm weird for the things I said, I probably am to a degree, and that wouldn't be the first time. See my Cyberpunk video. Still, I hope I put the things you also don't like into words, which makes you understand yourself better and can buy and play games that give you more enjoyment. So, what is the conclusion? Animal Well is incredibly unique and has raised the bar for future indie games. It exceeds in multiple ways from a visual standpoint with gorgeous lighting and a rich world, to items that have multiple use cases, to genuinely creepy moments in a 2D Metroidvania that I probably haven't experienced since Samus X back in Metroid Fusion when I was a child. For me personally, I think I will look at negative Steam reviews a bit more often in the future before I buy a game. At last, I have to ask Billy directly. What the fuck is the dog doing?